Did you hear the story about the naked, bloody guy living in a graveyard? Sounds like the beginning of a Stephen King novel, doesn't it? But it's actually found in the New Testament 3 times. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record this story. And as you might guess, this is the kind of guy most people would want to avoid. But Jesus did not. When we read the story in Mark 5, we need a little bit of a background to see where we are in the story. In chapter 4 of Mark's Gospel, we see that Jesus began to teach by the lake. Now, the lake is the Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee was located north. It's actually the beginning of the Jordan River, which flows south into the Dead Sea. But the Sea of Galilee was a very popular place where Jesus ministered. Cities like Capernaum, Bethsaida were there along the Sea of Galilee. And so Jesus had gone there to teach. There was a large crowd that gathered around him, and he spent most of the day teaching. And then toward the end of the chapter, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go to the other side." They got in the boat, went across the Sea of Galilee to the southeastern shore, away from the crowds. Now, it was probably surprising to his disciples when he said, "Let's go to the other side," because the other side was the region known as the Gerasenes. It was a Gentile region. There weren't many Jews there. Maybe they thought, well, we're just going to get away, maybe get a little rest and relaxation. The disciples may not have wanted to go, but Jesus was giving the directions. And so they got in the boat, they started out, leaving the crowd behind. And what we see here, we see oftentimes in the life of Jesus, where he would move away from the crowds of people in order to minister to one. And that's what we have been considering these last several weeks, the one-on-one encounters Jesus had. Oh, sure, Jesus could feed thousands and teach thousands at a time, but it's these one-on-one encounters that are recorded in the Gospels. I believe we can learn from these. Most of us are never going to address thousands of people at once, but we are called to reach one. And in these various encounters, we can learn a lot from Jesus' example. This morning, we're going to look at Jesus and the intimidating. This fellow was certainly an intimidating soul, and we see how Jesus responded to him. We begin in Mark chapter 5 with a scary resistance in the first 5 verses. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. So having crossed over the Sea of Galilee, they come into the country of the Gerasenes. On a lot of your maps, it'll be called the Decapolis. Decapolis means 10 cities. And there were 10 cities that were very Greek in culture and in origin. They were Gentile. Very few Jews lived there, and the Jews that did were called Hellenistic Jews. They had adopted the Greek culture. So it had been a rather foreign place for Jesus and his disciples. Now, there were, in this area, a large herd of pigs being raised. And immediately that puts up red flags in our minds, right? Because the Jews didn't deal with pigs, and those were unclean. They didn't eat pork of any kind. So that strikes us as odd. Why would there be pigs? Well, this was a Gentile region. They didn't have those particular laws in place, and so we see that they're going to factor in very much in this account. Now, as soon as they step on shore, their silence is shattered by a blood-curdling shriek. Looking up the hillside, the disciples see this man kind of beast-like. He's naked, he's disheveled, he's dirty. He's running toward them. His eyes are wild. He's screaming and shrieking at them. I'm sure a lot of them are like, okay, let's get back in the boat. We're out of here. Yeah, nice place to visit. Don't want to stay. But Jesus stands his ground. And so they waited to see what would happen. Max Lucado gives this description of the scene. Wiry, clumpy hair, a beard to the chest, ribboned with blood, furtive eyes darting in all directions, refusing to fix on any one thing. No sandals to protect his feet from the rocks on the ground. No clothing to protect his skin from the rocks in his hand. He beats himself with these stones. Bruises blotch his skin like ink stains. Open sores attract flies. His home is a limestone mausoleum, a graveyard on the Galilean shoreline, the caves that are cut in the cliffs. Apparently, he's more secure with the dead than he is with the living. Pretty intimidating sight, isn't it? Kyle Eidelman writes, one of my friends preached a sermon about this guy and called it a nude dude in a rude mood. But at the time, I don't think anybody was laughing. His strength was as intimidating as his appearance. Mark describes this superior strength in graphic terms, explaining that no one could overpower him. No chain could bind him. No shackles could restrain him. He behaved like a savage beast, living outdoors, screaming, howling, gnashing his teeth, mutilating his flesh. This man seemingly had everything against him. He was an utter social outcast. It's not that he didn't have human companions. They were just all dead. He was out of control. No one could control this rage and fury. And he endured self-inflicted agony. He's awake at all hours. He cuts himself. We hear those words and we think, how could anybody do that? You'd be surprised at how many people are afflicted this way even today. How many mental illnesses and disturbances will cause people to cut themselves, harm themselves in various ways. I'm not saying they're all demon-possessed. I'm just saying that this manifestation is maybe not as unlikely as you might originally think. We see in this man a glimpse of Satan's goal for you and for me. The isolation, the obsession with death and darkness, the endless restlessness, the self-inflicted pain. Now, not every instance is as severe as this individual, but as I said, similar situations are all around us. And every word in this description just underscores his pathetic condition. But it also shows us something about the purpose and goal of demonic possession. It's to torment, to destroy the divine likeness with which we've all been created. This story is heart-wrenching. This is a human being. It's easy to forget that in the description. He seems more animal than man, but this is a human being. And the word that is used literally is demonized. We talk about someone being demon-possessed, but literally this is demonized. Someone who's under the influence, under the control of an evil spirit, in this case, many evil spirits. And yes, it is possible to be possessed by more than one. We read about that more than once in the Gospels. Demonization can vary in degree of influence, and here it's very extreme. Everyone considered this guy a monster. But if you look at him through the eyes of Jesus, you wouldn't see a monster. You see a man in misery, a man in need. Now, here we have in very dramatic narrative the full account of what happened when Jesus encountered the irrational, psychotic forces of a split personality. You might even say a man with manic depression. But that's the modern way of putting it. We have spiritual insight here that in this case, it was demonically empowered. Let me be very clear. Not every case of mental illness is a demon possession. I do not want to give that impression, but there are times when it is, and this was one of those. There was more to it than just a diagnosis that can be medicated. This derangement of personality was due to a possession by dark, evil forces, demons. Believe it or not, evil does have a face. It's not merely a concept. It's not just the opposite of good. Evil can be traced back to a single agent. We call him Satan. War, sickness, disease, catastrophes, violence, lust, addictions, pestilence, waste, selfishness, all sin, all that is wrong in the world is a particular expression of evil. It's all part of this unending rebellion of Satan against God. And the world continues to bear scars of his mutiny. Now, I know this perspective doesn't sit well with our scientific, rationalistic understanding of the universe. We want science to explain everything. We want to have a cause and effect that can be measurable and reproducible. And if it's not scientific, we just want to reject it. So there's very little room left in the mind of modern man for the supernatural realm, the spiritual realm. And that's why oftentimes concepts of angels and demons and Satan, even God himself, are often dismissed as bygone mythology, unsuitable for enlightened conversations. It should come as no surprise then that few people today accept the possibility of another expression of evil that we see here, demon possession. But even so, the Bible is clear. Satan not only works through nature to wreak devastation and destruction, but he also uses people. And on some rare occasions, an individual can become the victim of direct demonic control from within. And this is the kind of man Jesus met. Now you might wonder, why is it that Jesus encountered so many demons in his time here on earth? And I think there's an explanation for that. The demons knew who he was. You hear it in this story. They recognized who he was. And when he came to earth, here is Almighty God in one place at one time. They wanted to be there. Satan and all of his demons were there to do everything they could to disrupt what the Son of God was doing on earth. And so that's why it seems like every time Jesus turns around, he's being confronted with evil spirits. They were concentrating their efforts at that place and time. We may not see that concentration today. They're more spread out throughout the world. And yes, there are some places on our planet where demons are more active than others. But they're still alive and well. They're still wreaking havoc in the lives of people today. Now, let me also give a word of caution. Some people reject the whole idea of demons. Other people go to the other extreme, and that's all they ever see. And they live in fear. You know, I've known some people that every problem somebody has, it's a demon, you know. And they try to cast out the demon of nicotine and the demon of alcohol and the demon of pornography and all this stuff. You know what, folks? A lot of times those are our choices. We bring that on ourselves. Don't blame the devil for everything we do. Don't see a demon under every rock. Take responsibility for your choices. So we've got to avoid both extremes. We don't want to reject them completely. We don't want to be obsessed with them and think that that's all there is. And we also don't want to be living in fear. As Christians, we do not need to live in fear of Satan and his demons. Well, let's continue in verse 6. When the man saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus was saying to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. The demon speaks through the man. It's the man's voice. It's his vocal cords, but it's a demon that is speaking. "What do you want to do with me?" Literally, this is, what do we have in common? But it was a way back then of saying, mind your own business. Go away. I don't have anything to do with you. Just move on, Jesus. But notice the demon recognized Jesus' identity. He acknowledged what men may not, that Jesus is in fact Son of the Most High God. Yes, demons know who Jesus is. James 2:19 declares, "You believe there is one God? Good for you." Even the demons believe that and shudder. They believe it, and it has an effect on them. They are scared of him because they know he is greater than they are. Everything that is said in this account, these demons understand who Jesus is and who they are. They have more of the fear of the Lord than most people do. Doesn't mean they're saved, but it does mean that they understand and they acknowledge the truth. Now it's curious, when Jesus asked for a name, he uses the singular. The reply is a paradox. My name, singular, is Legion, plural. And then he adds, "for we are many." Now, using this name Legion, he's referencing a Roman military unit. You might remember from last study, the centurion was a commander of 100 men within a Roman legion, which numbered almost 6,000. Now, does this mean 6,000 demons were in this man? I don't know. Could have been. It's possible. But certainly the demons were trying to maybe impress by how many there were. Maybe they thought they could intimidate Jesus by saying, "We are many. You're not just dealing with one of us." Jesus said, "That don't matter. I'll deal with you all at once." But it does prove that there were more than one demon in possession of this man. This guy lived really what you might call a living death that we can only imagine in our worst nightmares. Mark records that the demons begged Jesus not to send them out of the area. If you'll remember from the Luke passage, it's worded a little differently. Luke says in Luke 8:31, they begged him repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. The abyss is sometimes termed the bottomless pit. You see it a lot in the book of Revelation. And I believe it's the same as the Greek term Tartarus. It is a temporary holding cell for angelic beings, for demons. And there are certain demons that are locked away in the abyss. Satan will be locked away in the abyss during the millennium when Christ is here on earth to rule and reign. And these demons are begging, "Don't send us there. We don't want to go there." It's not hell in the technical sense of the lake of fire, but it is this confinement. It's like being in prison. And they're begging Jesus not to go there. Well, verses 11 to 13 record a shocking removal of the demons from this man. A large herd of pigs was feeding in a nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us into among the pigs. Let us go to them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went in the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. This must have been a terrifying scene to witness. If you ever heard frightened pigs squeal, multiply that by 2,000. And seeing this herd stampede down the hillside into the lake. And then as a group they drowned. That stunned silence after all of that loud shrieking and squealing. It had to have been a terrifying scene. And it begs a question, why would Jesus have destroyed these pigs? I mean, what had they done? Now hold on. Jesus did not destroy the pigs, the demons did. Why would Jesus allow the spirits to go into the demons? It may have been to prove to everybody that was watching that the demons left the man and went somewhere else. It was a visual proof that this actually happened. But again, it just reflects the destructive power and intent of the demons. Jesus said of Satan, he wants to steal, kill, and destroy, and that's true for his demons as well. They got into the pigs and plunged them to their death. The Bible tells us that Satan is like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Satan is not something to play with. And it worries me, especially when I hear young people talk about Satan and demons in a very loose and flippant way. I had a girl just outside here last week. They were on the stairs, back stairs of the church. Asked me if I knew what a Ouija board was. I said, yes. She says, I like playing with Ouija boards. I said, I wouldn't if I were you. You're playing with fire, literally. Oh, but it's fun. And that's what Satan has done. He has tried to market himself as cool, as fun, as intriguing. And there is nothing intriguing about what this man experienced. And for many people, that's the door in. You start messing with Ouija boards, you start reading horoscopes, you start dabbling into the occult, and pretty soon, they own you. They possess you. Don't open that door. They're bent on one thing, your destruction. They're not out to make you happy. They're not to make you fulfilled. They're not to do anything good for you. They want to destroy you. Don't let them in. Now, we do see in this passage that demons operate beneath divine authority. They can't just go and do on their own. They must have permission. The demonic world and those who attempt to portray it in our day want us to believe that we are at the mercy of the supernatural. They are actually at the mercy of God. We shouldn't be intimidated by the presence of demons. We shouldn't be fearful. We should respect them. They have great power. Look at what this guy was able to do. Break chains. They're stronger than we are, but they're not stronger than he is. And that's where the promise of that song this morning, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. This is what's in the world, and it's intimidating, it's powerful, it's destructive, but greater is the power in us when we have Jesus on our side. Through Christ, we are victorious. Now, as shocking as that removal was, the reaction of the people was shocking as well. Beginning in verse 14, those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, sitting there dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people about what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and they told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. They don't seem to care that Jesus has this great power. They just want him gone. Instead of giving him the key to the city, they give him the cold shoulder. Go back where you came from. Get in your boat and push on. You'd think they might be appreciative, right? I mean, at least this guy's not going to terrorize the town anymore. You'd think they would appreciate the power that he has over the forces of darkness. No, they just want him gone. And sadly, that's often the case with people today. John put it this way: they prefer darkness to the light. So don't be surprised when you share Jesus with those who don't know him and they slam the door in your face. They might be able to see what Jesus has done in your life, and they still don't want it. Why? Because their deeds are evil. A lot of people would rather live in the dark than come into the light. And sadly, that was the testimony of these town folks. Even in our own day, people will tolerate religion as long as it doesn't affect the bottom line. Starts costing you money. They just saw 2,000 pigs run down into the lake. Some of them just saw dollar signs. Oh man, there goes our business. Don't be surprised when you see that in the world. We're not through with the shockers, though. Verses 18 through 20, we see a surprising refusal. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family. Tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. The story concludes with this former demoniac asking to go with Jesus. And then must be a shocking twist in the tale. Jesus says no. Here's a guy that's all excited. He wants to go with Jesus. I want to follow you. I want to be a disciple. And Jesus said no. Why? Why wouldn't Jesus take him? Why wouldn't he parade him around and say, hey, look at this guy. This guy had a legion of demons in him, and I got him out, We would think of him as, what a great marketing tool. Jesus said no. Why? Why wouldn't Jesus take him? One very good possibility is the guy's a Gentile. And the Jewish people would have had a hard time accepting Jesus if one of his followers was a Gentile. Say, well, that's not right. Well, it wasn't right, but it's real. And that was the situation at the time. But I also think there's more to it than that. Jesus knew he wasn't going to be able to minister in the Decapolis. They were asking him to leave. So who better to represent him than one of their own, who had a very powerful testimony? They would have recognized him. I mean, he would have been very well known all around that area. And people are saying, wait a minute, I knew you. You were the guy, I used to hang out in the graveyard. Oh, wow. What happened to you? Let me tell you. So I'm sure that Jesus knew it would be effective for him to share there. Now, one thing that really kind of strikes us odd, in many of Jesus' miracles, he tells the people, don't say anything. Don't tell anyone about this. Here he's saying, go home and tell everybody. What's the difference? What's the deal? Remember where we're at. This is a Gentile area. They wouldn't have all these convoluted ideas of messiahship. They wouldn't try to make Jesus a king. If anything, the people would have thought he was a magician. He had some kind of magic trick that he used on this guy. And so Jesus says, you go and tell what the Lord has done for you. This is no magic. This is God. This is the power of God. And there's something else that's very subtle, and you may not catch it at first. Jesus says, go and tell what the Lord has done for you. Well, who did it? Jesus. What's that make Jesus? Jesus is the Lord. So there's even a kind of a very subtle underlying message to this man's testimony. When Jesus acts, God acts. And this is truly a testimony of what God has done. So, what does this one-on-one interaction that Jesus had with an intimidating man teach us? It probably teaches us more about ourselves than it even does this unnamed soul. If I had been there, if I had been one of Jesus' disciples or maybe one of the observers from that area, I would have been scared of such a person. I mean, personally, I don't like to be around loud, violent, unpredictable people, especially ones that run around in no clothes. The world may not believe in demons, but I do, and I know enough to not to want to be around them. I would have either gotten back in the boat or I'd have found some large tombstone to hide behind. That's where I would have been if I had been at this scene. But to do what God wants, reaching all kinds of people, it requires that we get close to them, and that closeness is risky. It was risky for Jesus to go into this graveyard and talk to this naked, bloody lunatic. And you're going to feel that it's risky to talk to your coworker about your faith or to start a spiritual conversation with someone, to invite your neighbor to church. We need to overcome that fear and take the risk. And you know what the key is to staring down fear? It's staring at the possible return. Willingness to risk is always based on the potential reward. There's an example of this in the fire service. Firefighters have a saying, risk little to save little, risk a lot to save a lot. If you come onto a burning building and it's out of control, the first thing that's asked is anybody inside? If there are people inside, you will risk your life to go into that burning building and get them out. But if it's verified that all of the people are out, there's no one inside, you're not so willing to risk the lives of the firefighters to save stuff that can be replaced or that's already burned up. What are we willing to risk for the salvation of human souls? I think it calls for us to risk a lot. We're not talking about something trivial. These are souls. These are people created in the image of God for whom Jesus Christ died. They're worth the risk of our reputation or our feelings or whatever the risk might be. They're worth it. Too often we avoid getting close to someone far from God and to stay with difficult, draining, different people because there's risk. We might be rejected. We might look stupid. We may not be able to answer all their questions. When we stare at the risk, we're stopped by our fear. But we can stare down that risk by staring at the potential return. Each person that we find ourselves in close proximity to is a soul created in the image of God for whom Christ died. And it is God's will that we are to love that person the same way Jesus has loved us. Sure, the risk can be scary, but I think we need to be scared more of the regret of not telling them. The responsibility we bear when we do not share the good news. Satan and his forces, they can be scary, they can be intimidating, but remember this: greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. If there's one thing you remember from this morning, that should be it. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. The most intimidating person we encounter, even someone possessed by a legion of demons, falls at the feet of Jesus and calls him Lord. We have nothing to fear. So let's get out there and love people as Jesus loved them. Share with them the truth that can set them free. Would you bow with me in prayer? Lord Jesus, once again we are confronted by your example. We see your power over the supernatural, over the demonic. We look around in our world and we see Satan's agenda being carried out at every level, and how destructive it is to the souls of people. But we have the truth. We have the life. We have the healing they need. Give us the courage and the strength to go to those, even those that are intimidating, and share with them the good news that greater is He that is in us than he that is in the world. Give us that strength and courage, I pray. In your name, amen.